thousands of homeless people got a helping hand during the pandemic. It was a program called Project Room Key, which set them up in hotels around the city.
For years, the Motel 6 on Pioneer Boulevard in Whittier, California, sat mostly empty. Peeling paint on the stucco walls, weeds pushing through the cracked parking lot, a faded sign facing the freeway. Neighbors called it an eyesore. It was the kind of place you drove past without a second look. But in September 2025, a crowd gathered in that same parking lot to cut a ribbon, because the rundown motel had just become 97 permanent homes for people who used to sleep on the street. And how it happened might change the way you think about homelessness in America. To understand why this little motel matters so much, you have to understand the problem it was up against. Los Angeles County has more homeless residents than any county in the United States. On any given night, tens of thousands of people sleep in tents, in cars, and in doorways across the region. And for decades, the standard answer has been the same: build more affordable housing. It sounds simple. It is anything but. In California, building a single new unit of affordable housing now costs more than $400,000 on average, according to researchers at UC Berkeley. In parts of Los Angeles, some projects have climbed far beyond that. And money is only half the battle. Between buying the land, securing the financing, surviving the permit process, and getting through community objections, a single apartment building can take 5 years or longer before anyone moves in. Sometimes 7. Meanwhile, the people waiting for those apartments keep getting older. Some of them do not have 5 years to wait. So the math was brutal. Too many people outside, too little money, and a construction system moving at the speed of paperwork. City officials across California knew all of this. They had known it for years. What they needed was something faster and cheaper, and nobody could quite find it. Then came the spring of 2020, and the whole world stopped. When the pandemic hit, something strange happened to America's motels. Almost overnight, they emptied out. Business travel vanished. Road trips vanished. Budget motels that survived on thin margins suddenly had no customers at all, and many owners were staring at bankruptcy. At the exact same moment, public health officials were panicking about a different problem. Hundreds of thousands of homeless Americans, many of them elderly or sick, were living in crowded shelters and encampments where a virus could spread like fire.
The homeless should be going someplace else.
We just don't want any COVID, in our neighborhood.
California put those two problems together. The state launched a program called Project Room Key, which rented empty motel rooms and moved the most vulnerable homeless people indoors. Elderly men and women, people with heart conditions, diabetes, weakened immune systems, people who almost certainly would not have survived the virus on the street. The old Motel 6 in Whittier became one of those shelters. For the first time in years, every room had someone in it. Not tourists, grandmothers and veterans, people who had been invisible on the sidewalks a month earlier.
Shelters solve sleep. Housing and supportive services solve homelessness.
Outreach workers described what those first weeks were like. They would pull up to an encampment along the San Gabriel riverbed, kneel down beside a tent, and tell a 70-year-old woman that a clean room with a bed, a shower, and a locking door was waiting for her that same afternoon. Some people cried. Some refused to believe it until they were standing in the doorway holding a key card. One caseworker later said, the hardest part was convincing people it was not a trick, because life on the street had taught them that nothing good ever comes without a catch. For many of those residents, that motel bed was the first real mattress they had slept on in 5 years, and the first door they could lock in 10. And somewhere in those first chaotic months, officials in Los Angeles County had a thought that sounds obvious in hindsight. If these motels work as shelter, and the owners want to sell, why are we only renting? In November 2020, the county made its move. Using money from a new state program called Project Home Key, Los Angeles County bought the Whittier Motel 6 outright. It was not alone. The county spent roughly $90 million in state and federal funds to purchase 10 properties, including former motels in Baldwin Park, Hacienda Heights, Harbor City, Long Beach, Norwalk, and 2 in Compton. The logic behind HomeKey was almost embarrassingly simple. Do not spend $500,000 and 5 years building a housing unit from scratch. Buy a building that already exists, already has beds, plumbing, and a roof, and already sits on land nobody else wanted. A motel, it turns out, is shaped almost exactly like the housing homeless people need. Private rooms, individual doors, bathrooms already installed, parking, laundry, an office at the front. Buildings that took decades to construct were sitting there, finished, waiting for a check. For the next 2.5 years, the Whittier property served as interim housing. From late 2020 all the way through February 2023, the county used it to shelter medically fragile and elderly people coming off the streets. And during those years, the rooms did their job. People slept safely. They saw nurses and caseworkers. Some reconnected with families who had spent years wondering if they were alive. Small routines started to return, the kind housed people never think about. Residents learned their neighbors' names. They kept doctor's appointments because someone could actually find them at an address. Medications stayed refrigerated. Wounds healed because they stayed clean. Social workers on site helped people replace lost identification cards and birth certificates. The paperwork of existence that disappears fast when you live outside, and without which no apartment, no benefits, and no job application is possible. Slowly, person by person, the motel was doing something a shelter bed downtown never could. It was giving people their paperwork lives back, and with it, a path to something permanent. But everyone involved understood something important. A motel room is shelter. It is not a home. There was no kitchen, so residents lived on takeout containers and microwaved meals. The rooms were designed for a 2-night stay, not a life. Interim housing was a bridge, and a bridge has to lead somewhere. So while residents slept in those rooms, the county and its partners were quietly drawing up plans for what the building could become. The county handed the project to a nonprofit developer called Holos Communities, formerly known as Clifford Beers Housing, an organization that builds homes for low-income residents, people with mental illness, and people leaving homelessness. Their plan for the old Motel 6 was ambitious. Gut the building, convert the motel rooms into 97 real studio apartments, each with its own kitchen, plus a unit for an on-site manager. Add offices for case managers and support staff, because the people moving in would need more than a key. They would need help with healthcare, benefits, and simply relearning how to live indoors after years outside. And then there was one more detail, the kind that tells you what a project really thinks of itself. The plans included a small park, paid for through a grant from the Rivers and Mountains Conservancy, with trees and green space along the San Gabriel River corridor. And that park would be open to the public, not fenced off for residents, open to the whole neighborhood. The motel that people used to avoid was being redesigned as a place people might actually want to walk to. They even gave it a new name, Laurel Grove. Now, if you have followed stories like this before, you can probably guess what usually happens next. The neighbors revolt. There are angry meetings, petitions, lawsuits. Housing for homeless people gets announced everywhere and built almost nowhere. And this site had every reason to be controversial. It sits on Pioneer Boulevard, directly across the street from Pioneer High School, just off a freeway exit, in a working-class neighborhood of West Whittier, where families have lived for generations. But that is not what happened. County Supervisor Janice Hahn, who championed the project, publicly thanked West Whittier residents for their support and praised Holos Communities for designing something that would be an asset to the neighborhood rather than a burden. Her argument to the community was disarmingly practical. When the county owns the motel, she explained, the county controls it. It could guarantee security, guarantee management, and make sure every person living there was connected to services. A board member from Holos put it even more simply, saying the project proved you can house people in a way that actually improves the surrounding community. The neighbors were not asked to tolerate Laurel Grove. They were invited to use its park. Before the construction crews arrive, one quick thing. Some of you are watching this because the story feels a little too close to home. The rent keeps climbing, the Social Security check does not, and the distance between your life and a life on the street feels shorter than it used to. If that is you, or someone you love, a husband, a brother, a son, I put together a guide called The Veteran's Blueprint. It was written for veterans first, but the housing programs, benefits, and step-by-step strategies inside apply to almost any senior on a fixed income. It walks through exactly where to go and what to ask for before things ever reach a crisis. The link is in the description below this video. Now, back to the motel. In early 2023, the last interim residents were moved to other housing, the doors were locked, and the construction crews arrived. The renovation was expected to take about 18 months, and it was far more than a coat of paint. Crews ran new plumbing and electrical lines into every room to install kitchenettes. Walls came down to create community spaces and offices. Accessibility upgrades went in for elderly residents and people with disabilities, ramps and grab bars and wider doorways. Outside, the cracked parking lot gave way to landscaping, and the little public park began to take shape near the riverbed. Watching the building change, you could see the quiet genius of the whole idea. The hardest parts of housing construction, the foundation, the structure, the roof, the basic room layout, had all been finished decades ago by the motel chain. The nonprofit was not building a home. It was finishing one that already existed. Housing experts have pointed out something else about older motels like this one. Most of them are only 2 or 3 stories tall, with every room opening directly to the outdoors instead of into a long interior hallway. For elderly residents, that design is a gift. No elevators to break down, fresh air at every door, a parking spot a few steps away for the ones who still drive. The humble architecture of a 1970s budget motel, built for traveling salesmen and families on road trips, turned out to be almost perfectly suited for seniors coming out of homelessness. Nobody planned that. It was simply sitting there, waiting to be noticed. Then came September 19th, 2025. In the parking lot where police cars once idled, county officials, nonprofit staff, and neighbors gathered for the grand opening of Laurel Grove. Supervisor Hahn toured the finished studio apartments alongside the leadership of Holos communities. And the numbers announced that day are the reason this story deserves your attention. According to the nonprofit's chief executive, Christian Ahumada, the project was completed in roughly 1/3 the time and at roughly 1/3 the cost of a typical affordable housing development built from the ground up. 1/3 the time, 1/3 the cost, 97 homes. Think about what that means for the people holding those keys. Formerly homeless men and women, many of them seniors, walked into private apartments with their own kitchens, their own bathrooms, their own front doors, and leases with their names on them. An address for the mail, a place for family photos, a stove to cook a real dinner on for the first time in years, case managers down the hall instead of a case file in a drawer somewhere. Staff at supportive housing projects like this often say the same thing about move-in day. Residents do not run to the bed or the television. They stand in the kitchen or they lock and unlock the front door a few times, just to feel it work. For someone who spent years sleeping in a car or under a freeway overpass, that is not a policy outcome. That is a resurrection. And Laurel Grove is only one building. Across California, Project Homekey turned this idea into a movement. In its first phase alone, the program funded 94 hotels and motels, creating around 6,000 units of housing almost overnight. By early 2024, Homekey had funded more than 15,000 housing units and spent its full $3.5 billion allocation. When state auditors examined a sample of projects, they found an average cost of about $144,000 per unit. Compare that with new construction at $400,000 or more, and you begin to see why housing experts across the country started paying attention to old motels. Now, honesty matters, so let me be fair about the other side of this. Not every Homekey project went smoothly. In Santa Cruz County, a project converting old vacation cabins for homeless veterans ran out of money and stalled for years. In other places, critics argued that officials overpaid for aging buildings, and at least one developer collapsed into scandal, leaving projects unfinished. Journalists who filed public records requests found delayed timelines and murky accountability at some sites. The model is not magic. It still requires competent people, careful budgets, and follow-through. But when it is done right, the way it was done in Whittier, it produces homes faster and cheaper than almost anything else American cities have tried. California clearly agrees, because in September 2024, it launched a successor program, HomeKey Plus, with another $2.2 billion aimed at veterans and people with mental health needs. And the idea is spreading well beyond California. In Costa Mesa, another former Motel 6 on Newport Boulevard has been converted into 87 homes for veterans, low-income seniors, and people at risk of losing their housing, with veteran services and security on site. In San Luis Obispo, the city and a nonprofit called People's Self-Help Housing won $19.5 million in state money to turn their local Motel 6 into 76 permanent supportive apartments. And in Oklahoma City, far from California's housing politics, the Housing Authority bought a Motel 6 near Bricktown for about $3 million and is transforming it into a project called Vida Nova, roughly 73 apartments for people leaving chronic homelessness, funded by the city's own voter-approved program. Different states, different budgets, different politics. The same quiet realization. America already built much of the housing its homeless citizens need. It just built it with a neon vacancy sign out front. There is one more reason I wanted to tell you this story, and it is the part that stays with me. When Americans picture a homeless person, they usually picture someone young. The reality has changed. The fastest-growing group of homeless Americans is older adults. Roughly half of single homeless adults in this country are now over the age of 50, and researchers keep finding people in their 60s and 70s becoming homeless for the very first time. Not because of addiction, because of arithmetic. A fixed Social Security check meets a $300 rent increase. A medical bill lands in the wrong month. A spouse passes away and one income has to do the work of two. Researchers who study this call it the graying of homelessness, and they say the wave is still building as the baby boomer generation ages on fixed incomes in the most expensive housing market in American history. These are retired custodians, home health aides, truck drivers, and waitresses. People who paid into the system for 40 years. When they lose housing late in life, their health collapses at a terrifying speed. Doctors who treat homeless seniors say a 60-year-old living on the street has the medical profile of a housed person in their late 70s. The sidewalk ages you 15 years. That is why the story of a converted Motel 6 in Whittier is bigger than one zip code. Many of the people who moved into those rooms during the pandemic were elderly and sick. Many of the people living at Laurel Grove today are seniors who worked their whole lives and simply ran out of margin. They did not need a lecture or a program with a waiting list measured in years. They needed a door that locks, a kitchen, and someone nearby who knows their name. One old motel provided 97 of those doors. So the next time you drive past a tired motel with a flickering sign and an empty parking lot, look at it for an extra second. You are not looking at an eyesore. You might be looking at an apartment building that is already built, already wired, already plumbed, waiting for a city with enough imagination to see it. Whittier saw it. The question is, how many other cities will? Here is what I would love to know from you. If your town proposed turning a vacant motel into permanent homes for homeless seniors with on-site management and services, would you support it on your street? Tell me honestly in the comments, because I read every one, and the conversation down there is often better than the video. I will see you in the next one.